This is CineBack version 2 for the FX3 and FX30. In seconds, it can convert your camera into a boxy style cinema camera or a more documentary style setup using our XLR handle extension kit, also available from CameraFoundry. It no longer requires a cage on your camera to work and is compatible with the F38 quick release system, making switching between a large format cinema camera kind of setup into something much more compact and mobile, instantaneous, and so easy to work with, while also remaining secure with our new quick release knobs, which can instantly be installed to lock the camera down in place, or using bolts with a traditional Allen key, which is now hidden in the body. It still sports a V mount or gold mount battery plate with a switch that sends power to dual USB-C power delivery jacks that can support power to your camera and other devices, as well as a rotating 4x D-tap splitter, a new cable management area with a quick access door, loads of cable routing options, compatibility with our new right angle cables, a newly redesigned top cheese plate with a ton of mounting options, the same massive mounting plate for quick releases, as well as being able to use the screen in any orientation, no matter how you like to film. It's also compatible with 8 cages and counting, so you can get your favorite cage installed with the FX3 and CineBack. Along with version 2 for FX3, we are coming out with several different modules to upgrade all CineBacks we've ever made, including new power modules, quick release modules, and more. There's a lot to unpack here, so check the timestamps below this video to find what you're looking for, including different cage compatibility and installation guides, and all of our compatible accessories and gear on the product page at camerafoundry.com. So let's dive in and take a closer look at everything that's new with version 2 of the CineBack for FX3 and FX30. CineBack for FX3 and FX30 version 2 is capable of adding a quick release and using the camera without any cage. If you want to use the FX3 with the XLR audio handle without a cage and still use the quick release, skip to this part of the video to continue. Everything you need is included with the kit with exception to the quick release itself. You can purchase this separately and there are several different versions available. While the older F38 bottom clamp is compatible, we recommend going with the newer version 2, which has a better locking system and multiple threads, so you can thread it in with more than one bolt, making sure that your whole camera doesn't twist. All of the F38 plates are compatible. You just need to be aware of which one you're using so you can use the appropriate spacer. So we have the smaller units with a single thread and they're a little thinner, and then the slightly larger version that has multi-thread, which is nice for keeping things from twisting. So the first thing we're going to do is set the camera aside and we're going to prepare CineBack by installing our base plate. Again, there's the older version with a single thread or the newer version, which is what we recommend and stock on the store, that has the newer locking mechanism and the multiple threads. So we're gonna install this one and we're gonna install it in this orientation with these silver pins on the back here facing backward and the release button on the right hand side of the operator. We're going to install it using 3 of our smallest black 1/4-20 screws that come with the kit, and it gets installed just like this with these front 2 slots and the center slot. So now we have our quick release installed and ready to go. Next, we can install our plate onto our camera. Again, you can use either the thicker version 2 with the multi-threads or go with some of the smaller single thread options depending on the quick release system you have. For this install, I'm going to go with the thicker plate here and we can simply thread it on, and we want to just roughly center it for now on the camera. At this point, you might be tempted to go ahead and throw the camera onto CineBack Lite with the quick release, but the problem is it's not going to line up with our screen protector here, and that's because we need to add a couple spacers to make sure we're fully compatible. To do this, go ahead and flip CineBack Lite completely upside down, and we're going to remove these 3 screws that connect the cheese plate to the body. Once removed, we can lift up the cheese plate and set it aside. Next, we're going to install one of these 2 spacers. One is labeled N and the other is labeled O. The N spacer is going to be used if you're using that multi-thread thicker plate on your camera like you see here. It also has a slot for our Allen key to be able to quickly remove the camera if needed. The O spacer is used for the smaller single threaded plates that you see a lot of the time used with the F38 system. For this example, we're using the thicker plate, so we're going to go ahead and stick with the N spacer. If you were going to use the O spacer, you simply place it right here and line up those 3 holes with our 3 threads on CineBack. And you'd use the same 3 screws that you removed from CineBack earlier. The N spacer will ultimately be in that same position, but we've added a couple of holes to be able to mount it to our cheese plate. So grab the cheese plate that we removed earlier, take those screws and set them aside, flip the plate over so we're working on the same side as our quick release, and we're going to mount the spacer right here using 2 of the included silver screws so that they're countersunk here and here. And now we can take this whole thing and flip it back over and install it on CineBack Lite right here. To mount this spacer, we're going to need the longer Phillips panhead screws. Go ahead and line them up and use a Phillips size 2 screwdriver to tighten in place. And be sure not to over tighten. And with that done, we are now ready to add a spacer to the upper inside of the plate. So grab the top spacer that is labeled J, and we'll use 4 silver screws to install this. In the end, it'll look like this with our countersunk screws installed and those 2 remaining holes lining up with our top slot. If you're using the spacer that has the slot for the Allen key, at this point you can go ahead and install it here. You might need to take another Allen key to get it out for the first several times because we designed it to be a little snug so that it can kind of break in over time. Alternatively, you can face it forward so that you can more easily access it and get your key out. From there, we can open our camera screen and go ahead and simply connect it to our CineBack using the quick release, close the screen, and we're ready to go out and film. We'll talk about tightening the top ones here in just a second, but it really is that simple. Press the button, pull your camera out, shoot handheld, or simply add it back with the quick release. Just amazing. And of course you can go ahead and lock this lever by pressing it backward, and now the button can't be pressed. You can't detach the camera accidentally. To remove it, simply press forward, and now we have the quick release again. One thing we want to check is to make sure that the threads on the camera are lining up with these 2 holes on CineBack and with our adapter. And the way you can adjust that, for example, my camera is too far back, is to remove the camera, flip it over, and adjust the position of the quick release plate. By sliding this forward and back, that's going to adjust where those holes land until we can get it perfectly aligned with those 2 threads. So since I need my threads to go backward, I need to put the plate a little farther forward. In the end, here's what I ended up having to do to get it to work for me. So we've got the little rubber nub facing backward and the silver screw about in the middle. So let's talk about the top threads. What are we going to do to lock down the camera? Well, there are 3 options. The first is just to not put screws in there. Just leave the camera as is. It's going to be a little less stable. It should be just fine, but if you're going to put a bunch of top handles and other gear up here, you're going to want to lock down the camera using those 2 threads. Now we've devised a couple ways to do this. The first is to use 2 screws, specifically the 3rd from largest screws that come with the CineBack for FX3. And I could go ahead and install those and use our Allen key that is right here built into CineBack to snug them up. That way, when I'm ready to go ahead and remove my camera, I simply pull out the Allen key, loosen those 2 screws, remove them, and now I can quick release the camera out. But by far my favorite way to lock down these top 2 threads is using our quick release knobs, which we include with this kit. I'll show you how to make these just in a second, but in short, once we add our camera with a quick release, all we need to do to lock it down in place and unlock it is to stick these guys in. I like to back thread until I hear a click, then tighten it down onto the camera. There's one. I'll grab the other one, stick it in, wait for a click, and tighten it down in place. Just like that, and now the camera is rock solid. We've got our connection on the bottom with our quick release, multiple threads here so we have no twisting, and then 2 threads here at the top using our knobs. And whenever we need to get the camera back out, it's as simple as taking those 2 knobs off and removing them, pressing our button in, and getting the camera out. So a great way to get things really locked in place, and it's really, really straightforward and simple. Now the only downside to these knobs is you are going to lose some real estate on your cheese plate. So if I wanted to have a big NATO rail here, that's obviously going to block. I still have our area locating pins here, so I could grab a handle that's compatible with that. Simply mount it right there and tighten it down with the knob, and that would totally work and still allow for those quick release knobs to operate just fine. So that is an option if you still want the ability to quickly get your camera out. Simply loosen up the two knobs, pull them out, and pull the camera out. When you're ready to go back into filming, simply reinsert, close the camera screen, add our two knobs, and we're back in business with our quick release setup, which just makes just a great experience from a shooter's perspective. So now let's go ahead and talk about building these quick release knobs. To do that, you're going to need to figure out which screws you need to convert into knobs. Then you'll need 2 of our knurled knob pieces and 2 of what we call the threaded collars or spacers. First, start by taking the screw that you need to convert into a knob, and then we're going to take the threaded spacer and take the textured side and point it toward the front of the screw and simply thread it on like you see here. Once you've fully threaded it on, take the knurled cap to the knob and we're going to align it up and press it in place. Now, you might need to use some force or even a hammer or screwdriver just to tap it a little bit to get that last little spot where it stays on. And you can also, of course, use some super glue inside of there just to make sure it doesn't come back off. I'll go ahead and take my makeshift hammer and give it a nice little whack. And now we have our thread ready to rock and roll. So that is how to install the FX3 or FX30 into CineBack using a quick release and no cage. Now let's talk about installing the FX3 into CineBack with a quick release and or the XLR handle and no cage. So installation is identical to everything we've talked about so far, except we're going to remove this top plate. Start by flipping things over, take out your 2 quick release knobs or 2 bolts that are connected to the top of the camera, and remove these 3 bolts at the back of the top plate. Once those are removed, we can take off the top plate completely, and we're gonna grab the rear plate from the XLR extension kit and install it right there using the same 3 screws. From there, we can install the XLR handle using the longest screw included with the XLR handle kit. Then we can mount the NATO rail at the top using the 4 flathead screws and making sure that the area locating pins with the 3/8 thread is at the very front, like so. Now we can take the handle and we'll go ahead and install it on the FX3 and we'll tighten down the 2 thumb screws at the front of the camera. The next thing we can do is check the alignment. So if you feel like the handle is just not quite lining up with those rear threads on the plate, what we can do is go ahead and disconnect the camera from the CineBack quick release, and we can loosen this plate and slide it forward or back, and that's going to move those thread points back and forth until we get it just right. I made an adjustment there, so let's go ahead and try it again. And that is looking significantly better. So we've got the threads lining perfectly up with the slots on the handle. At this point, we would normally put some bolts down in here with an Allen key, but another option is to make 2 more of our tiny quick release knobs so that all we have to do to get our camera quickly installed or removed is tighten them down just like that. We can go out and film all day long, and when it's time to remove the camera, we simply loosen those 2 knobs, set them aside, and quick release our FX3 off of the rig. We can of course remove the entire handle in one fell swoop with these 2 knobs, or simply put it back and install our 2 knobs again, and we're ready to go out and film with FX3 and our XLR handle. So a really nice, fast, easy to use install for really any shooting scenario. If you prefer a cage, but you still want a quick release system like we've talked about without a camera cage on FX3, we are coming out with a quick release module that is available for all CineBack models and is compatible with the FX3 with cages installed, as well as the XLR handle kit. So if you want to rig it up in a cage and want a quick release, that is still completely possible with CineBack. Now let's talk about getting the FX3 or FX30 installed with CineBack FX3 version 2 using several different cages. The following instructions are going to be compatible with the cages on screen, and check the product page in case there are more cages added in the future. But in this section, we're talking about the Neewer cage and a whole bunch of different SmallRig cage variants. For demonstration, I'm going to use the Neewer cage, but this is again going to work with several different cages and the process is the same. The first thing we're going to do is flip our cage upside down, and on the rear 3/8 thread, we need to add one of these silver or brass 3/8 to 1/4 20 adapters. This is what they look like out of the bag from CameraFoundry. So we're going to go ahead and install that on the bottom of the cage right here at the back. From there, you can go ahead and install the cage according to the manufacturer's instructions. We're going to go ahead and flip out the camera screen and set the camera aside while we prepare CineBack. What we're going to be doing is adding this spacer here, which is labeled J, and you can install it in this orientation using 4 of the included silver screws and the appropriate Allen key. This will take these 2 open holes and line them perfectly up with the top slot of CineBack and those 2 threads on the camera. At this point, we're going to go ahead and set CineBack down. We'll grab the camera and slide it in place. Now, if you feel like you need to slightly pry up this top plate, that is totally fine, completely normal. Now we can go ahead and line up the 2 threads of the camera with the 2 threads on CineBack. Grab 2 of the 3rd from the smallest socket black screws from the kit, and we can go ahead and install them here and here. I like to go backward until I hear a click so that I don't cross thread the threads on the camera. With those lightly tightened, we can go ahead and close the camera screen, flip the whole thing over, and add another screw right here into that adapter that we installed in the cage earlier. This time we're going to use the smallest black socket screw that comes with the kit. And with that installed, we can flip things onto the side and check fitment on CineBack. If the screen looks a little wonky and it's not parallel with the screen holder, we can simply loosen this bottom screw or thread and slide the camera forward and back until we get that just right on the side. But if everything looks nicely aligned, we're ready to go ahead and go out and film with CineBack. Now let's talk about installing the XLR top handle with CineBack in the following cages. So the Neewer cage, as well as a whole host of SmallRig cages. And check the product page to see if we've added any future cages to this list. The only exception will be the Hawklock cage from SmallRig that comes with this XLR handle system. So if you're going to be using this with CineBack, skip to this point in the video where we'll talk about how to get it set up. If you purchase CineBack in its standard configuration with this solid top plate, go ahead and remove it. If you purchase CineBack with the XLR extension handle kit, there will be 3 screws right here. Go ahead and remove those so we can install the plate. Go ahead and take the rear cheese plate that comes with the XLR extension kit, and we're going to install it right here on CineBack using the 3 smallest screws that come with the kit. Once installed, we can set the body aside and get our XLR handle extension installed by taking the longest screw that comes with the XLR handle extension, running it through this rear handle into Sony's handle, and then adding the NATO rail that goes on the top and then securing it in place with 4 of these flat head screws, making sure that the 3/8 thread on the NATO rail with the 2 area locating pins is facing toward our XLR jacks. Once all of that is installed, we can go ahead and grab our camera and install the handle by simply sliding it in the hot shoe and tightening down those 2 thumb screws on either side. Next, we can grab CineBack again, and we'll go ahead and line up these top 2 holes or slots with these 2 threads on the back corners of the cheese plate. And once we have that aligned, we'll use 2 of the smallest screws that come with the kit and install it in place. Again, we're going to use the smallest screw that comes with the kit. Finally, we can take a look at the screen side of the camera and make sure that it's nice and parallel with CineBack. If it looks a little wacky, we can loosen this bottom screw and push or slide the camera forward and back until things are nicely aligned again. And with that done, we now have the XLR handle extension kit installed with CineBack, and we're ready to go out and film. While the SmallRig Hawklock cage is absolutely compatible with our XLR handle extension kit, it also comes in a variant that you can purchase with a couple accessories to mount to Sony's XLR handle. So at this point, we're going to talk about not using our handle extension kit, but making sure that this works with your setup and with CineBack. Start by removing the top plate of CineBack, whether that be the XLR extension, rear plate, or the full-size CineBack plate. You could use these threads on the top of CineBack for other gear, or if you just want to cover them up to keep dust and grime and dirt from getting in there, you can grab the M spacer and go ahead and install that like you see here, and a couple of washers which are included. And I'm going to go ahead and install a couple of our smallest socket screws just to keep everything tidy and in place. With that done, we can go ahead and install the Hawklock cage and the XLR Hawklock handle with CineBack using two of the smallest bolts here and here on the bottom of CineBack into the cage. The only downside to this setup is going to be that we don't have a full connection to the top of CineBack, and we can't remove the handle because it's going to hit CineBack. So we would need to take apart a couple different parts here. So not absolutely perfect with this integration, but it does physically work, and you could totally run a setup like this using the Hawklock cage. Although if you really want to stick with this cage, you might consider either going with CineBack Lite, where you use a quick release, or picking up the quick release adapter for CineBack so that you can quick release the camera off of CineBack, then remove the top handle as needed. Now let's talk about installing the FX3 or FX30 with the Tilta cage. First, we're going to install the cage following the manufacturer's instructions. Next, we're going to take a CineBack and we're going to remove the top plate because we need to install the M spacer, which looks like that, and this K spacer to get the cage to fit. So we can start by removing these three screws. Once installed like that, we can take the whole thing, flip it over. Using those same three screws, we'll reinstall the top plate. With all of that done, we can now grab the camera, flip open the camera screen, and we'll go ahead and install it in CineBack. Now, you may feel that you need to lift up this top plate here. That is completely fine and normal for installation, and we can shimmy the camera in until the threads line up with the top of the camera and these two holes. Next, we can grab the second to longest set of screws and go ahead and install them here and here on CineBack. I like to back the screw out and push down until I hear a click, then I'll tighten down. That way I don't strip the camera threads, and we'll keep things nice and tidy. With those two installed, we can flip the whole cage upside down and add one single thread right here. Finally, we can close the camera screen on the side, and we're ready to go out and film with this great cage and camera and CineBack combo. Now let's go over setting up CineBack if you've also purchased the XLR extension kit for the Sony XLR handle and getting it all to work with the Tilta cage. To install the top handle kit with the cage, we're going to add the NATO rail to the top of the rear handle attachment, just like you see here with two flathead screws. Then we can attach that to the Sony handle with two more flathead screws, making sure that the 3/8 thread with the two area locating pins is near the front. Then we can take the longest screw that comes with the XLR handle kit and we'll drop it into the rear of the handle and tighten that down. With the handle prepared, let's go ahead and get ready with our cheese plates that go on the top of CineBack. If you purchase CineBack with the XLR extension kit, it is going to ship like this without the top plate. If you purchased CineBack and then later purchased the top handle kit, you'll need to first remove the top plate, but in our case here, we're just going to remove these three screws. At this point for the Tilta cage, we're going to need to add this M spacer with these keyed slots, just like this on top of CineBack Lite. Now we can take the rear cheese plate, and this is a two-part system. So take the rear cheese plate for the XLR extension handle kit and install it on the top of CineBack. And we'll use those same three screws that we removed from the top earlier. Next, we're going to grab the spacer that has an L on it, and we're going to flip it over and install it on the bottom plate right here with two silver screws here end here. And there's how it looks installed. At this point, we can install the camera with the XLR handle and the handle extension kit. Or if we wanted to, we could use a front plate like you see here and install it right there using 4 screws and install the camera here. So that's kind of 2 operations, a more boxy cinema style setup, or exclude that front plate and use the camera with the handle and the XLR unit for more of a documentary style setup. So for this handle setup, I'm simply going to line up the back slots of the handle with the 2 threads on the back of this cheese plate, and we'll use 2 of the included smaller socket screws here and here. Once we have those 2 screws installed, we can flip CineBack upside down. You can add 1 of the second to smallest screws here. With that done, we can finally close the camera screen and we're ready to go out and film with CineBack, our FX3 and Tilta cage, and the XLR handle extension kit. Keep in mind this is also compatible with the CineBack quick release system, so if you don't want to have to take apart a bunch of bolts to get your camera out, you can check that product out over at camerafoundry.com. Now let's talk about installing the FX3 or FX30 with the Sirui cage into CineBack. First, we're going to install the cage following the manufacturer's instructions. We're not going to be using any top or bottom plate, just the cage, and I've added the hand strap here. Next, we're going to take CineBack and we're going to remove the top plate because we need to install the M spacer, which looks like that, and this K spacer to get the cage to fit. So we can start by removing these 3 screws, and we're going to flip it upside down like this, and we'll be installing this K spacer with 4 silver included screws. Now before we install it, and we'll be installing it right here, we need to add 4 washers to even further space it from the plate for this particular cage. As you can see, I've added 4 black washers here, and we can go ahead and install our top plate over that. I've got it loosely installed and you can see those washers in there. I like to kind of shake it down toward the front of the plate to make sure they're not blocking those 2 holes that we need to use later. With that done, I'll go ahead and tighten up all 4 screws. Finally, we can flip things back over and reinstall the plate with those 3 original black screws. With all of that done, we can now grab the camera, flip open the camera screen, and we'll go ahead and install it in CineBack. Now, you may feel that you need to lift up this top plate here. That is completely fine and normal for installation, and we can shimmy the camera in until the threads line up with the top of the camera and these 2 holes. Next, we can grab the second to longest set of screws and go ahead and install them here and here on CineBack. I like to back the screw out and push down until I hear a click, then I'll tighten down. That way I don't strip the camera threads, and we'll keep things nice and tidy. With those 2 installed, we can flip the whole cage upside down and add 3 more of those small black screws here, here, and here. If they don't perfectly line up, you can loosen the top again and then install these 3. Finally, we can close the camera screen on the side, and we're ready to go out and film with this great cage and camera and CineBack combo. Now let's take a look at using the top handle kit with this cage. Start by grabbing one of the smallest black socket screws that come with the kit and installing the camera and camera cage with 1 single thread right here, but don't tighten it down all the way just yet. If you purchase the standard CineBack, go ahead and remove the top cheese plate. And if you purchase CineBack with the XLR handle as a single kit, it'll arrive in the box kind of like this, and there will be 3 screws here. You'll need to remove those and install the M spacer right here. From there, we can take the rear plate that comes with the XLR extension unit and install it right here on CineBack using 3 of the smallest black screws that come with the kit. To install the top handle kit with the cage, we're going to add the NATO rail to the top of the rear handle attachment, just like you see here with 2 flathead screws. Then we can attach that to the Sony handle with 2 more flathead screws, making sure that the 3/8 thread with the 2 area locating pins is near the front. Then we can take the longest screw that comes with the XLR handle kit and we'll drop it into the rear of the handle and tighten that down. Now we can grab the XLR handle kit that we've assembled and we'll go ahead and install it onto the camera, keeping in mind that the camera isn't fully locked down just yet, and we'll be addressing that here in a second. So I'm going to tighten down Sony's screws if I can get this thing lined up. There we go. Just like that. I'll flip things around in this orientation, and we're going to grab 2 more of these smallest screws that come with the kit and install them through these slots in the handle and into the rear corner threads of the cheese plate. With that done, we can flip the whole thing over and tighten down that final screw. You can also look at the side of the camera, and if this screen isn't parallel with CineBack, maybe it's a little kind of crazy and rotated, you can use that screw and move it forward and back to kind of flex the camera in and out of alignment and then tighten it down. And with that done, now we have a super solid XLR handle kit set up with the FX3, the Sirui handle and strap, and this is just a really nice combo with this camera and CineBack. Now let's talk about power considerations, how power works on CineBack, all of the jacks and your outputs and whatnot. And I want to start by talking about batteries. When it comes to the V-mount version of CineBack, just about any V-mount is going to work great. These small mini V-mounts are really handy with this small V-mount plate. It keeps things nice and compact and more lightweight, so that's going to work just fine. But of course, you can go all the way up to something significantly larger, like this SmallRig 212 if you have a lot more power needs or just want a ton of runtime. When it comes to how power works on CineBack, there is absolutely no power draw when the power switch is turned off. So here on the side of CineBack, we have that mini power switch. When it is off, the battery isn't sending power anywhere. So you can leave it on your rig, put the whole setup in your bag, and not have to worry about drawing power. The second you turn on power, it's going to send power to all the jacks on the opposite side. So our 2 power delivery capable USB-C jacks, as well as the 4 D-tap connections on the side here. These 2 USB-C jacks are capable of multiple different voltages, and I'll put all of them on screen here so you can take a look. And this is great, meaning you can power 5-volt devices all the way up to power-hungry power delivery devices like cameras, monitors, laptops, and other gear. The D-tap connections are unregulated, meaning whatever the voltage is coming off of your battery is going to go directly to these connectors. So if you're going to send power from the D-tap to your camera or another device like a monitor, you need to make sure that it's going to work with whatever voltage your battery is, or use a regulated cable that is going to take the 14 to 16 volts from your battery and send it down to something smaller like 12 volts or whatever you're going to need. We're also going to start carrying cables like this that go from USB-C to 12 volts so that you can use the USB-C connector on the back of CineBack and power things like your monitor if needed. So keep an eye on the store for that, as these are really handy cables with lots of flexibility. Now let's get into powering your camera with the 2 different methods. And the first is going to be USB-C, and probably the most popular for several different reasons. And we'll go over that here in a second. But first, I'm going to connect this right angle to right angle camerafoundry USB-C cable, which is available on our store. It's the perfect length for CineBack. So what I like to do is flip the thing over, flip out the camera screen, and stick it just underneath the camera, run it through to the other side, and now we can open the little door to the cable compartment area, grab the cable, and we're going to connect it to the bottom port of our USB-C module right back here. So just like that, nice and tidy. We can now close that door, flip things back around, and I'll go ahead and plug it into our camera. And you can see how compact this is and just tidy. So we don't have a bunch of cables sticking out here of the camera. It's just really, really clean. So that's a great reason to go with USB-C, is how clean it is, but also how safe it is. Let's add a battery. Just gonna grab this Global Dynamics right here. Now I'm going to power on CineBack, and we'll power on the camera as well. And now we have power delivery. You can see on screen here, we've got the power delivery plug-in icon there. And what's great about this is if something crazy happens, like I disconnect this battery, it's going to be okay because the camera is using the built-in Sony battery, which you definitely need for this to work. And we still have power, 100% battery. And then when I reconnect power or hot swap a battery back on here, we now have power delivery again. So that's one perk, is kind of safety. If something happens with your power source, it's okay because you have the Sony battery built into the camera or plugged into the camera. This also protects you from strange power issues. So often, if a battery is powering both the monitor and the camera, sometimes if you have an HDMI connection, we can run into issues where either the camera or the monitor can be fried because of power running over the ground line. Power delivery eliminates funky, weird power issues like that on cameras. So it's a great way to go, and it keeps all of your D-taps available for other equipment. Another way to power power the camera is with a D-tap dummy battery or battery coupler. It takes D-tap from our splitter to a fake battery that goes in the camera. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that the cable is regulated and it's taking the high voltage and dropping it down to whatever the camera needs. Once you do that though, you can take out your Sony battery and the battery door that is attached to the FX3, and you can simply connect your battery coupler and open the vanity door here so we have access to a place to stuff our cables. I'll go ahead and run all my cables in there, and I'll plug into the bottom port. I'll tidy up my cables a little bit and then close the door, and now we have a really nice tidy cable run for our power. At this point, I can grab a battery, plug it in, turn on CineBack with the switch on the side, and I'll go ahead and power up the camera. Just like that, we've got power. It's going to say 100% because it's drawing from this battery here. And this is where we can get to kind of a sticky point. Sometimes there's issues, or people have reported issues using this method of power. And if you're a crazy person like me, you can leave the camera on and just use this switch here to turn your camera on and off like you see here. I'll go ahead and just cut the camera power by cutting the power from CineBack. I would not recommend you do this. This is probably a terrible idea. It's what I do all the time, but I've heard there's all kinds of issues if you do this. So take that all with a grain of salt. Probably shouldn't be doing that. The last thing I want to mention is that you can actually rotate this entire module with the D-tap splitter. Most of the time, it should be fine just like this with your cables usually exiting toward the camera, but if for whatever reason you want to flip this thing around, you can simply disconnect all of the cables, remove these 4 Phillips head screws, gently pull the whole module forward until it is loose, and I mean gentle, and you can rotate it 180 degrees and then reinstall it, and I won't tighten them down because I'm going to flip it back the other way, but now your cables are going to exit the opposite direction. And to reverse, just pull up and rotate back to the way it was before, set it down in place, and retighten those screws. Cable management is one of the greatest things about CineBack, and you can see just behind the camera we have this little door here, and I can peel it open, and you can see I have stuffed it with all kinds of cables. This red cable, which is going USB-C to 12 volts and powering our monitor, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, is 4 feet long, and I've got that thing jammed in there, and you can go ahead and close the door and keep things nice and tidy. We're also running a cable to power the camera over power delivery, so that's going right here, and it just keeps everything nice and tidy, and there's still extra room there. So cable management is one of the best parts about CineBack and being able to keep things nice and tidy, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing on a rig when you have a place to stuff all those excess extra cables. So that is CineBack version 2 for the FX3. Learn more at camerafoundry.com. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you guys in our next product video.